Hi, welcome to the Guitar Department. I'm your host, Joe Alton. On this episode, we're going to talk about the opening riff to Sweet Child of Mine, and we're going to look at the caged system for bar chord playing, quick intro to caged. We're going to have a special guest lick of the week with Brian Taz Grant, and in the tone zone, we've got our pedal of the week, the Pelt by Fender. Welcome to the Guitar Department. The opening riff to Sweet Child of Mine was written as a bit of a joke by Slash. He thought it sounded like circus music. But what it actually is a string skipping exercise that outlines a D major chord. It's actually one of the forms we're going to be talking about in the next segment, in the caged segment. And the way it works is you start with your pointer finger on the 12th fret of the 4th string, the D string. And then you're going to jump down 2 strings to the 2nd string and play the octave of that D. So we've got D here, and then the 15th fret on the 2nd string is your 2nd D. Then you go up a string to the 3rd string, to the 14th fret, and you're going to play 14 and 12. And that's your first 4 notes. The second 4 notes have a different string skipping portion where you play the bottom string on the 15th fret, and then skip up to the 3rd string on the 14th fret, and then down to the 14th fret on the 1st string, back up to the 14th fret on the 3rd string. So the notes we've got here are D, D, A, G, and then the octave of G, back to the A, F sharp, and back to A. And this is basically a D chord played an octave higher than where you probably know it as an open chord. Just like that. The pick hand basically alternates the entire thing. You pick down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and then you play that whole measure one more time. For our next measure, we're going to play most of the same notes, but the first note of our riff changes. It's going to be the 14th fret of the 4th string, or E, to lead off this one. The rest of the notes are exactly the same, though. So you go 14 here, down to the D, the 15 on the 2nd string, 14, 12 again, and then G on the 15th fret, A on the 14, and then F sharp again, and back to that A. Now you might have noticed in the intro, I wasn't playing it pinky, 3rd finger, pinky, 3rd finger. I was going pinky, 3rd finger, 3rd finger, 3rd finger. And that's just my preference. There's a lot of ways you could play this. You could technically play it without the pinky at all, just using your 2nd finger and your ring finger and your pointer. So experiment with different fingerings and see what you like. In our third portion of this, each of these measures plays twice, so this will be measure 5. We're going to start the same riff with the G on the 12th fret of the G string. And again, all the rest of the notes are going to be the same, so it'll be just like our first measure, except the note isn't on the 4th string. The first note is on the 3rd string this time. And then we circle back the riff to the very first measure again. So that first measure happens another 2 times in a row. And that gives us that D on the 12th fret as the first note again. From there, the riff happens in its entirety a second time. So we go through that same portion with 12. We do it twice. And then with 14 again, the E is our bass note. And then one more time with the 12 on the G string. and then back to the 12th fret on the D string. And that takes us to round 3. Now during that second run, the bass is coming in with its little melody that it runs over top of that, and the rhythm guitar and the drums are starting to build up. So by the time we get to this third run, everybody's playing along with the way that they're going to be playing for most of the song. The build-up is done, and he's running through this riff one more time with a different ending this time. And at that point, after that third variation, we're going to play this alternation riff, still string skipping. We're going to start on the E string, the 12th fret. The note itself is actually E. And we're going to alternate between that and an A on the 3rd string. So 12 here, 14 on the 3rd string, up to the D, the 15th fret on the 2nd string, back to the A, down to that 12 again, that E, up to 14, the F sharp, 15 for the G, and then back to the 14, back to the 12 for the E, and then one last hit on the D, and then we're just going to play those two together. And that's the intro to Sweet Child of Mine. And so now we're going to talk about the caged system. And this will just be a quick intro into what the caged system is. When used properly, the caged system can help you unlock the entire fretboard so that you can smoothly transition between scales from one position to the next. As guitar players, we find ourselves sort of stuck in a box sometimes where we know a few licks, but as soon as we move left or right, we're lost. We have to move back into that one pattern that we know. Now, there are a lot of ways to break out of that. Caged is just one of the systems that we're going to go over in the next few weeks. But the way it works is it's based off of the open chords that spell out the word caged. The C chord, the A chord, the G chord, which I'm fingering with just one finger on the bottom 2 strings as opposed to 2. Some of you might have seen this. It's sometimes referred to as a more modern way of playing it, but it's really just replacing the 3rd, the B, with the D. But I'm going to play it for this purpose. I'm going to play it with just my 3rd finger down here for reasons that will become clear. And then our next one would be E, and finally D. And the first thing we need to do to understand how to use caged is to turn those into bar chords. And we do that by moving them up a fret. And when you move a chord up a fret, an open chord, you can't just move the fingers up a fret, because the 2 notes that are open strings also have to move. So you actually have to refinger the entire thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these 3 fingers with the next 3 fingers in the cycle, my middle finger, ring finger, and pinky. And this is the C form. And with my pointer finger, I'm going to bar the bottom 3 strings, because in this case I only need the bottom, I need the 1st string and the 3rd string. So my pointer finger will cover the bottom 3, it's called a half bar, and then I've got my pinky finger on the root of the chord, in this case C sharp, and the other 2 fingers carrying out the rest of the shape, and that gives us a movable bar chord shape, which now that I have this, I can move as high up the neck as I'd like. Each time I move it up, the chord gets a different letter name. So for instance, where I'm at now with my pinky on the 7th fret, this is an E chord. Same as our open E chord down here. You might recall this shape if you've ever learned the song Under the Bridge. He plays it down here. and then goes to what we'll later go over as the E shape for the F sharp chord. So that's how we do this. We're going to take our open chords, move them up 1 fret, and then cycle all the fingers through so that we've got our pointer finger free to bar the notes that were zeros to begin with. So that gives us our first chord, which in this case is a C shape. It's a C sharp chord, but we're going to refer to this as the C shape from now on. Then we have the A shape, which is just 3 fingers, 2nd fret on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. And then we're going to recycle those fingers through so that the 2nd finger, 3rd finger, and pinky are playing this chord. This is actually one of the easier ways to play an A chord anyway, because the pinky takes up a lot less room on that 2nd string, and allows the middle finger to get a little bit closer to its fret, whereas with these 3 fingers, the pointer finger has to be clear back by the 1st fret and push a little extra hard. So that's just a quick tip on playing an A chord, but we're not done yet. We're going to move this up a string, and again, just doesn't quite work. So we're going to have to take the pointer finger and bar across the 1st fret. In this case, we're going to do a 5/6 bar, meaning that we're covering 5 of the 6 strings. So I've got my 1st finger on the 1st fret of the A string, which is a B flat, and it's also the name of this chord. And it's also covering the bottom string, the 1st string, on the 1st fret, making this into a complete bar chord. Now, this is sort of an awkward way to play this chord. Same thing with the C shape that we did earlier. These are all kind of tricky to play because it really spreads out your fingers. You need quite the wingspan to do it. But the higher up the neck you move, the closer the frets are together, and a little bit easier to play. And also, it's a little bit easier to bar higher up on the neck because the nut is pushing the strings outward from the neck, which makes it harder to push down the string on the 1st fret than it is closer to the 12th fret, where it's actually the easiest. So we have our A shape now, which you could also finger. A lot of times you'll see people finger it this way, with just the 3rd finger flattened across those 3 strings that we had the 3 fingers on. You can also use the pinky if your pinky's able to do that. If you're able to do this, this is maybe the easier way, but it's a little less complete because you can't play the bottom string that way. So for our purposes, we'll keep it this way just to demonstrate. So this is now our A shape. So we've got our C shape and our A shape, and that brings us to G. G is actually the hardest one in terms of the physicality of what your fingers have to do. We have the 3rd fret, 2nd fret, and then the 3rd fret on the bottom string. And what we're going to do again is cycle those fingers through, 3rd finger here, 2nd finger here, and pinky here. This is actually a pretty common alternate fingering of a G chord for when you're trying to switch from G to C. Makes it a little bit easier. But what we're going to do with it again is we're going to move it up 1 fret. And in order to do that properly, we have to bring the zeros with us. Now in this case, that means having my 3rd finger and pinky on the 4th fret, my middle finger on the 3rd fret, and my pointer finger stretched back to the 1st fret. Which I can do, but normally I just wouldn't. This shape is much easier higher up on the neck, but it's still one of the less used shapes out of all of the 5 shapes that we're going to talk about. Usually if you use this shape, you'll use only part of it, maybe just the middle 3 strings, or have the pinky or ring finger on the bottom string to carry out that higher octave of the root. Or again, you could just cover the lower notes and use your pinky and ring finger to cover the root and 3rd of that chord. When you do that though, you can't really strum the bottom string. That changes the chord to a G6. Or in this case, a C sharp 6, because we've moved it up to the 6th fret. My pinky is on a C sharp. Next, we've got the E chord. Now, this is one of the most common bar chord shapes there is. First of all, if you just take an E chord and move it up a fret, it actually does kind of sound cool. But what we're actually looking to do here is, again, cycle the fingers through so that our pointer finger is free, move it up a fret, and bring the zeros with us. This requires a bit of strength because your pointer finger is holding down 3 strings at this point, and they're not next to each other like they are in that G chord. You've got your top string, your 6th string, and then the bottom 2 strings, the B and E strings, and the rest of the chord is fingered underneath here. So you really only have to squeeze with those 2 parts of the finger. If you're struggling with bar chords, you don't want to waste a lot of energy squeezing around that first knuckle area, because you might not need to. Those notes are covered by higher frets, so you won't actually hear those notes. But this is our E form of the chord, and it's one of the most common bar chords out there. And again, it changes notes depending on where you play it. So if I bring it up here to the 3rd fret, it's a G chord. And then last but not least, we've got our D chord, which, as I mentioned, we used a bit earlier a scale form of it to play the intro to Sweet Child of Mine. It covers that same D chord an octave higher. What we're going to do is use our 2nd finger, 3rd finger, and pinky to carry the form of the chord, and then when you move it up 1 fret, you bring your pointer finger. In this case, you don't actually have to bar unless you are wanting to cover the 5th string also. That's acceptable, but not as common. So starting at the 4th string on the what is now an E flat, and you can see that stretches us out quite a bit. It's another one of those that just gets easier as you move it up the neck. And it's also another chord that's used in the song Under the Bridge by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So that covers our 5 shapes, and here's kind of the why behind it, the reason you would actually use these shapes. Beyond their offshooting scales and the ability to flow up and down the neck. But as chords, just in and of themselves, you have a root here. We'll start with our open C chord. You have an open C, and then if I want to move that to the A shape, I'm going to take my pointer finger and put it on that same root that I had my 3rd finger on, and I'm going to finger the A shape underneath that note, which makes it a C chord. The next step in the cycle is to use our G form. We're literally spelling out caged here. Here's the C, here's our A form, here is our G form. In this case, my 3rd finger is playing the root on the 8th fret. And then from there, we're going to move to our E form, which has my 1st finger on the 8th fret. And then I'm going to use the note my pinky is on now to carry it again an octave higher. And then if I wanted to keep going, I would just finger the C form a little bit higher, and we could keep going basically as high as we want until we run out of room or it becomes too difficult to play. And that is our intro to the cage system. Up next, we're going to have a special guest lick of the week from Brian Taz Grant.
Hi, today the lick of the week is going to be out of a Dorian. I get asked a lot of times, how do I get the sound that I play when I'm playing blues? And a lot of guitar players ask me, well, are you playing a minor pentatonic? And I say, no, I don't actually use a minor pentatonic. I actually use a scale called the Dorian. And what a Dorian basically is a minor pentatonic with the addition of the 2nd scale degree and the addition of the 6th scale degree. So by having the 2nd and the 6th, it just colors the chord progression a lot more. Also, one of the things I think about is when I'm playing to the chord, I think about maybe altering a note for the chord. And I'm explaining this because the lick that I'm going to show you is going to emphasize both of these 2 concepts. So when I think of playing playing out of a 12-bar blues, the chord that is usually played is a dominant 7th chord. And the dominant 7th chord has a major third. But in a minor pentatonic, we have the minor third. So what I usually do is when I'm playing against that one chord, I'll alter that minor third and play a major third. So I'll play a line like this. And so this will be the lick. And I'll show you exactly what I'm doing here. So what I'm actually doing is out of that minor pentatonic, I'm starting on the 3rd string with my 1st finger. And so I'm playing my 1st finger, then I'm playing up to that major third with my 2nd finger. And then I'm going to play the 2nd string with my 1st finger. And now this is the note that's an octave higher of that Dorian note that I was talking about, that 6th scale degree, so I'm playing. And so I'm playing 1, 3, 1, 2, I can't count. 1, 2, I'm thinking that's the 3rd, and that's why I said 3. So I'm moving up to that major third of the chord, 1, 2, 1, and then I'm playing my 3rd finger on the 2nd string, and then my 1st finger on the 1st string, which is outlining that A7th chord. And then now I'm coming down catching the 7th, and then I'm going back to 1, so I'm playing so far. 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1. I'm going to 3 on the 3rd string, back to 1. Then I'm going to play once again that 1st finger, moving it up to the 3rd and ending on the 1. So the line is. So let me go through those notes again. 1, 2 on the same string, the 3rd string, 1 on the 2nd string, 3 on the 2nd string, 1 on the 1st string, catching my 7th, 4 on the 2nd string, 1 on the 2nd string, 3 on the 3rd string, 1 on the 2nd string, and I'm going to play the 1 again, roll it and kind of hammer on, and then end on the 1. And that really emphasizes the chord. It kind of spells out the chord because you're playing all of the chord tones in there. You have the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, and the 1. That makes up an A7 chord. And that is your lick of the week.
So now it's time for us to enter the tone zone, and this week our pedal of the week is the Pelt by Fender. We've covered earlier a similar pedal to this line that Fender has put out. They have a whole new line of pedals. We covered the Bubbler Chorus. This one is their Fuzz, and it is called the Pelt. You'll notice it has the same lit up LEDs on the knobs. That's for if you're in the club and it's a little bit dark on stage, you can see exactly where your dials are. And of course, you can flip them off if you don't want them on. It is battery powered, though we have it plugged in right now. And let's give it a listen. Here's my clean tone. And then I'm going to flip it on. Got kind of a classic fuzz element to it there. And fuzz, we talked about last time when we did a fuzz pedal. It has sort of a square wave compression. So it's taking a heavy signal, a heavy distortion, and compressing it to the point that the wavelength of it just comes up, moves flat over, and then back down like a square. So it's meant to sort of emulate a broken amp sound. Sort of like you've broken your speaker. But this one has a whole range to it. First thing I want to show off is we have a mid switch. 3 settings. It was all the way down. Here's the mid setting on the mid switch. And then let's boost that up to all the way up. by the way, are great for when you want your lead part to punch through the mix a little bit better. Boosting the mids is one of the classic ways to do that. Now, that's not all we have here though. We also have a switch that just says thick. So let's go ahead and hit that and see what it does. So it's got a little bit more low end on it. Sort of deviating from that classic fuzz into a more modern metal tone. And then we've got quite a bit more going on here. We've got the level is our volume, so we're going to leave that flat. Right now I've got the tone sort of on the higher end, so I'm going to move that down to about 9 o'clock. And I'm kind of playing the same lick over and over to demonstrate how these do sound different. But it's honestly hard not to mess around a bit. So let's move that to 12 o'clock, see what that sounds like. You can hear it's got a little bit more snarl to it, and then if I turn that up all the way, I'm also on the bridge pickup, so if I flip that up to the neck pickup, and give us a little bit darker tone also. It's got quite a smooth tone to it at that timbre. Back to the neck pickup, and we've got a fuzz option here. If I turn that all the way down, it's just off. We'll turn that up to 9 o'clock. Hit it at noon. Let's take that all the way up. You can hear that sustain in there too. Just hitting one note. One more option here, and that is the bloom. If I turn that up all the way to hard, a little bit more high end. If I turn that back down, a little bit more low end. And that's our pedal of the week, the Pelt by Fender. All right, well, thank you for watching The Guitar Department. I'm your host, Joe Alton. I want to thank Riemann Music for giving us a place to shoot this show, as well as providing our pedal of the week, the Fender Pelt, as well as this beautiful PV Retro Fire guitar. It's one of our used models. It's for sale here, by the way. I want to thank Bryce, our producer, our cameraman, Jason, and I want to thank Brian Taz Grant for being a part of this show. And now, he's going to play us out with a little 12-bar blues.